If you want to pump your body and expand your mind, there's only one place to go. Mind Pump. Mind Pump with your hosts, Sal DiStefano, Adam Schaefer, and Justin Andrews.
A while ago, we did an episode, and in the beginning of the episode, we talked about there was a transgender athlete that won a weightlifting competition. And the conversation between us was that we think that
it's not fair.
That there's a competitive advantage in many cases. And so that was our opinion, and that episode went out. And then I got contacted by the Out Foundation, and the conversation was that they think that we're misinformed, that they would like to have a discussion with us. And I thought it would be a brilliant episode. Like, let's do an episode on this. Let's talk about this. And by the way, the Out Foundation is a great, from what I see online, a great organization. They're trying to bring fitness and wellness access to the LGBT community, and I think that's a good thing for anybody. But anyway, they introduced us to two transgender athletes, Chloie Jonsson and Bennett Kaspar. Chloie, in fact, had a huge lawsuit with CrossFit, so a lot of people might know who she is.
Yeah, we got into that a little bit,
and so the conversation. We talked about that. Is there an unfair advantage? And I think we still disagree on that. However, it got a lot deeper. We went into a lot of different things in terms of what it means to be transgender, what it's like to transition, the politics around it. It was a really good conversation.
Yeah, it was just nice to have an open discussion and have, obviously we had questions, sure. that were, different than just the sports angle. Like, we wanted to know more about, what it is and what your daily life looks like, being transgender. So we covered a lot of topics in this episode.
Yeah. It was a good conversation.
No, it was, I think it was very informative. I think that, I had a couple things that Bennett had said I was completely floored by. I had no idea that there's close to 1.5 million transgenders that we know about. That's a much larger number than I was aware of. So, and I love when I don't know when someone schools me on something, and so I feel like and Bennett's got a law degree and background, and so a great person to have a conversation like this. I think when they first came in, they were a bit apprehensive because they weren't sure
what angle we would have, or
what our intentions were. And I think at the end of the day, Mind Pump is all about talking about these types of conversations that most people are scared to have. And I think you get situations where the only podcast that would put something out like that is a podcast. It's like an echo chamber that is pro one way or the other way for a lot of the topics that we discuss. And we like to go into our out of our comfort zone and have conversations like this one today. And I think for the most part, it was really, 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 really good.
It was. At the end of the day, all of us are the same. We all, the three of us or four of us, including Doug, if somebody's cool, we're going to be cool with them.
We'll be cool back.
Yeah, I don't really care, male, female, non-binary, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you're a cool person, you're a cool person. And at one point, we got into that conversation where, Bennett talked about how, white men and white privilege. And I said, we can only look at the individual. And that's the argument you have to make, because it's going to benefit everybody, especially your community. Because if people can just judge you on being an individual and how, in your character and how you treat people, then you're going to fucking win people over. You're going to win this whole whatever debate or that's happening in the country. But if we keep putting people in these groups and assign them these general ideas of how people should be or whatever, or how they are, we'll never move ahead. We have to look at people as individuals, and we're always in support of that. And again, at the end of the day, the question of whether or not there's a competitive advantage, like I firmly believe that there, in many cases, there is a competitive advantage. However, these organizations are private. They're fully within their rights to sanction and make the regulations and laws however they want. And you know what? Bennett and Chloie made a very good point. It's so early, we won't know what those parameters should be and what's considered an advantage. Because like Chloie, for example, transitioned when she was 15 years old. Well, she's probably not going to have an advantage But somebody who transitions, from, male to female at the age of 25 may, because they've gone all the way through puberty and had, but, so that's a good conversation. Like, where should you draw the line and what does that look like? And they're right. We kind of don't know a whole lot yet. Right? It's kind of new. So it's a really, really good conversation. I really enjoyed it. They're really cool people.
Yeah.
We're all supportive of what the Out Foundation is doing. So that was awesome. So now you can find Chloie and Bennett on Instagram if you want to follow them. So Chloe's at Chloie Jonsson. That's CHLOJONSSON. And Bennett is at mx.Kaspar with a K. And then the Out Foundation is theoutfoundation.org. And then if you want to donate to this organization to support what they're doing, go to theoutfoundation.org/donate-1. I also do want to mention this month, all month long, we re-released MAPS Anywhere. This is our MAPS program that is essentially equipment free. So this is a workout program you can do anywhere. All you need are maybe some bands and your body. It's good for beginners. It's good for advanced. It allows you to scale up your intensity to get your body to respond. It's extremely effective. And we re-released the program because we redid all the blueprints and videos. It looks beautiful and brand new. In fact, those of you that already own MAPS Anywhere, check your library now. It's already been updated. And for those of you that don't have it, it's 50% off. So we cut the price in half all month long. All you got to do is go to mapswhite.com and use the code WHITE50, WHITE, and the number 50 without any space for the discount. And I guess that's it. So without any further ado, here we are talking to Chloie and Bennett.
Enjoy.
I really want to thank you both for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
This all started because we do our show, and at the beginning of our show we do what's called our intro, and that's where we just talk. We just have a good conversation. And the topic came up, and I can't remember who it was. I think it was in New Zealand. It was a transgender athlete who won, so broke some records in competition. And so the discussion was, is it fair? Is it fair? And so we have our opinion, and I'm pretty sure you're both clear that we think that there's a competitive advantage. And so we talked about it, and I got contacted by somebody from the Out Foundation. I wasn't familiar with this organization, by the way, which I looked into them. They're phenomenal. Their goal is to promote health, fitness, and wellness to the LGBT community and help people have access to fitness. And I think that's phenomenal. And so we got on this email thread, and the individual I was talking to said that, that we didn't have all the information and that our opinion was wrong. And I basically said, we're very, very open to talking about this. In fact, we love having our minds changed completely. And so that's how we all got connected. And so I appreciate you guys both coming on the show and, being able to talk about this. But before we get into that topic, I want to know a little bit more about the two of you. Mm-hmm. Now, I know a little bit more about you, Chloie, mainly because I heard about you through your lawsuit a while ago with CrossFit. And this is before CrossFit changed their rules. What was that? How did that all happen? What was that all about?
I'm really bad with dates. I did quite a few drugs for a while back in my youth. So I think it was about 2013, 14. I just wanted to do the open.
Okay.
And we contacted CrossFit anonymously just to see what the regulations were, because I've never had any legal paperwork or documentation past the age of 16 that didn't say I was anybody but who I am now. So I just wanted to make sure that I had all my I's dotted and T's crossed and so on and so forth. And then they basically, the short of it told me is that I couldn't compete unless I competed as a man.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said 16, since you were 16, does that mean at 16 is when you made your transition and that's what your paperwork shows? Or?
I transitioned when I was 15 and then everything changed over when I was 16.
Oh, wow. So you went through the whole process of all that. Do you mind if I ask what that was like? And because I don't know, I had two clients. I used to own a wellness facility. We were talking about this earlier because you grew up in the town that I owned my business. And I had a client, or one of my trainers had a client who was with a man who then transitioned. They stayed together, and then they used to come work out. And every once in a while I'd ask questions. So I was very curious. I didn't know anybody who'd done that. So I still don't know a whole lot of what that process was like. So, and you were young, you were 15 years old. That must have been, what was that like? And that whole process, was that a difficult thing?
Well, how about explaining the process?
Yeah,
I don't even know the steps that you have to go through, how long that takes.
I think it's a little bit different now, but back then, 25 years ago, you had
must have been much harder.
Yeah, it just wasn't talked about. We've been around forever, but we transgender people. But I ended up changing high schools for multiple reasons. Ended up transitioning. You had to do what they called the real life test. So that was dress as your preferred gender for a year before they assessed you to approve you for hormones.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
How do they measure that? How does that work? They just say
therapy.
Oh, okay.
So then you do it for a year and you go see a therapist.
So you lived as the gender you preferred and you did therapy and talked to your doctor people and
Luckily, that's not the standard anymore.
It's changed.
For a trans person. You no longer have to say to a therapist,
there's no test.
I'm trans, and then you have to prove it. It used to be basically that you'd have to prove to a therapist who was not a trans person that you were trans enough to deserve their permission to pursue transition.
It's like you're trying to close them and prove them. That's what.
Yeah.
Wow,
you have to go to a therapist and convince them that you are who you say you are, even though they don't know who you are and they don't know what it's like to be a trans
Was
person.
it common that someone would deny that? Like a therapist would be like, oh, no.
Oh, really?
She's not serious enough or he's not serious enough.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This is what people don't get about being trans is that I'm going to jump the shark and go straight into talking about competitive advantage. The steps that you have to go through in order to transition are insanely complicated and they take a long time and it's really hard on your body. It's legally hard. It's expensive. It's a bureaucratic nightmare that anybody would go through that just to gain some sort of a competitive advantage in a sport is ridiculous.
Well, now you know where that idea. Now you know where that idea first came from. So I actually did a little bit of research on that, and the IOC started testing, or saying you had to be how you were born to compete in 1968. I believe was the first time they started talking about that, and this was because of fears over Soviet male athletes. Competing as women to win more medals. And now, to be clear, and this is good for the audience to understand, during that time we had the Cold War, and so there was a lot of fear and stuff, but that's where it kind of first started, that idea that somebody would do that for an advantage. Now, to be fair...
It's so crazy to me.
And it speaks to the cisgender person's assumption that a man in a dress is the same as a trans woman. So it speaks to the cisgender assumption that that a man putting on a dress to gain a competitive edge in a competition, he's doing that for his own for sporting reasons and for national pride. I imagine the Soviets were really wanted to stick it to the West and all of that. But in real life nowadays, a man doesn't just put on a dress and go, I'm a woman now. That's not what it means to be a trans woman. And I think a lot of people assume that, when we lift regulations on trans people entering competition or doing things like cis people, that all these cisgender men are just going to start putting on dresses and calling themselves women in order to do better. And you guys are all cis men, right? Would any of you put on a dress, shave, wear a wig, go out dressed as a woman just to gain a competitive advantage over other cis men?
I wouldn't, but I also think I think it's crazy that, and they've done surveys on this where they talk to Olympic athletes and ask them, if it meant that you were going to die in 5 years, would you, to win the gold medal, would you? And 80% of them say yes. I think that's crazy.
That's insane.
Well, that speaks to a whole different level of issue, right? That's a person with a whole different problem. If you're calling yourself a trans person and changing your gender identity and your body just to be a better athlete, then you don't deserve to win. That's that's just hands down.
Yeah, no,
you're in the wrong place.
I agree. And to be honest with you, I think even if there were people who would change their gender just to win or try and win an advantage or get an advantage to win, I think that percentage, if it did exist, which I've seen no evidence of it, but let's say it did exist, that would be such a small percentage. It would be absolutely minuscule. And so that's not really the the conversation that I want to focus on.
How
because
do we filter that?
Yeah, I don't really care. I don't really care about that because I think that's either not going to happen, or if it does, it'll be the most rarest thing of all time. I think the conversation really is, is there an advantage? Is there an advantage for an athlete who, transitions? And I believe the IOC regulations are you have to be you have to have transition at least for a year. At least your hormones have to measure a particular amount for a year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that what it is?
Yeah, they recently changed them.
Okay.
It used to be that you had to have, if you were a trans woman, you had to have sex reassignment surgery, and you also had to live a certain amount of time as your gender identity as a woman, and you have to have hormone levels under a certain amount for X amount of time. They've removed the surgery component because that's no longer a legal requirement to transition in most places. So, if a state or country doesn't require you to have reassignment surgery to change your gender, then it's kind of ridiculous for a sporting agency to require the same, or a sporting governance rather. So the surgery thing is off the table, but yes, they still have to have levels under a certain amount and things like that. For people who do have surgery, your natal levels drop below what it would be for even cis women.
So that's what I was going to ask you. Do you know what I don't know what the levels are? Like, how does that work?
It's 10 nano, isn't it 10? What's the measurement that they use?
It's 10 nanomoles
per liter, right?
Nanomoles.
And that's that's why I had to make you say it. That's the limit that they should reach. But now this is for men who transition to women, and oftentimes they will measure up at that. Many times cisgender women will measure around 1 or 2. So there's always that argument. However, there are women who, and I can't remember what it's called, they have higher levels of natural testosterone. In fact, that's been a little bit of a debate for a while. And I do want to get into that whole thing, but I want to know more about you, Bennett, because you compete in what sporting events in particular?
So I'm a former college, or I played rugby pre-transition as a female identified person. After college, and I played club. I played softball growing up competitively, and then started doing CrossFit when I retired from rugby. And I transitioned at the age of 30, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, and continued CrossFit through my transition and still do CrossFit.
So you still compete in CrossFit?
Yeah.
Do you know since you're a child that this is something you want to do? I've read some where people say
CrossFit
no, not CrossFit. Both. I knew I'd want to do.
It didn't exist back then.
Yeah, because you just did this at 30.
Yeah.
So you did you know for a super long time before? Or?
No, and so that's a really that's a big misconception about what it means to be trans. In fact, the reason why it took me so long to transition was because I thought all trans people knew from a really young age that they were in the wrong body, and that hasn't been my experience. And it took me a really long time to realize that I am a trans person, despite the fact that wasn't my story. And so I actually, although I am trans and I have transitioned physically, I identify more as a non-binary person. So I don't identify as a quote-unquote man, and I don't identify as a woman. I identify as a trans-masculine person who is somewhere in between.
Okay.
So for me, because I spent so much of my adult life living as a female, I had a whole professional career, I had a whole identity pre-transition. For me, I don't have the lived experience of what I feel like what makes somebody a man. So to speak. My lived experience is that of somebody who has experienced life on both sides of the gender binary. And so to me, I consider myself a non-binary person.
Okay.
What has it been like for you to live both sides of it? Like, what are the pluses and minuses of each? I would love to hear your opinion.
Well, let me tell you, male privilege is a real thing.
Oh, really? What do you notice?
It is a real thing. It is 100% real. So the other day, I say the other day, this was like 3 years ago, but it feels like the other day to me because I will never get over how shocked I am by it. When I first started to pass, which is a term we use in the community when people on the street don't clock you as being trans.
I see.
When you are able to pass successfully as the opposite gender, you are assigned as, which is not everybody's goal, by the way. Not all trans people want to pass, and they're valid if they don't want to. But one of the first moments when I realized that I was passing was I got into an elevator, and there were like 4 other men in my office building that were in the elevator I didn't know. And a woman that I didn't know also walked in. She had a skirt on. She had heels on. She was dressed to go to work. She gets in the elevator and rides up like 30 floors, gets off. And as soon as she exits the elevator, one of the dudes in the elevator turns around and said something about her like, man, I wouldn't kick her out of bed in those heels, or something really shitty and douchey like that. And I looked around like, first of all, my eyes get really big, and I'm always like, he clearly thinks that I'm on the same team that he's on, which is a really interesting experience.
Now, were you at first like, oh, cool, like they think I... Or
no, I was
horrified.
No. I was horrified because I was like, who the fuck does he think he's talking to like that? Like, does he, and he was looking at me. I was like, what about what I'm doing right now is giving him the impression that I'm okay with what he's saying and that I'm inviting this kind of conversation. Turns out it was nothing. Short lesson I learned is that cis men just do that kind of stuff all the time. They feel like they can, like they have permission to. I don't give people permission to do that, but something about being a dude in the company of other dudes.
Here, and this is, look, everybody experiences this. Guys, when they're around each other, talk to each other a particular way. Girls can also do the same thing.
We are worse.
Yeah,
I think we're worse.
I was just going to say this.
Let's hear your perspective.
Well, at least I am.
Yeah, I was going to say Chloe maybe is not.
I may be quiet right now, but I don't really have a censor to me. I just say whatever I feel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when guys are around just guys, we talk a particular way. I think sometimes that's okay, sometimes it isn't. For example, assuming that you'd be okay with that, maybe not a smart thing. They don't know who you are, but they see a dude.
Yeah, I don't think that's a male privilege thing, though.
Yeah. I think they see a dude with a beard.
I don't think that's a male privilege.
I think they're looking at a guy with a beard and tats.
I think that's an asshole. I think that's just an asshole. I think that's just an asshole that you run into, and I think there's there's bitches out there too.
Those kind of guys off.
That comment was not necessarily an example of privilege. I will say that people give me the benefit of the doubt that I am right when I start speaking from the get-go.
Well, you have a good-looking beard. That's what it is.
It must be the beard. I will tell you what, this beard is like a one-way ticket to success. I'm telling you. I get so much. It's ridiculous. I get so much respect from people just because I have a beard. And so for all of you cisgender men that think that your beard gives you some magic powers, it doesn't. It turns out all it takes is 0.5 cc's of testosterone once a week. It's not magic. It's just genetics and a little shot.
Why just shit all over my beard?
It's not that
took
big
me 35 years to film this thing.
People always hit me up on social media. They're like, how did you grow your beard? I'm like, the same way you did, dude. I just don't cut it and it grows. That's what happened.
How many milligrams of testosterone is that? Is that 100 milligrams or 50?
It's 100 milligrams because I think it's 200 milligrams per cc.
Okay.
Yeah, 250 probably.
That's usually what it is.
Probably 250 and you're probably...
That's a decent amount.
Yeah,
your testosterone levels probably measure...
Probably higher than mine.
Yeah, in the upper range of...
the last time I got my labs done, so if you were a trans person who's on hormone replacement therapy, you should be getting regular lab work done by your physicians to make sure that your levels stay good and healthy. And the last time I had my levels checked, I was in the 75% range.
So you're in the upper range of what's considered healthy, or whatever, which is higher than.
I'm low.
It's different for every trans person though. So just like every cis dude has natural hormone levels that are the optimal level for that person, it's the same. It's the same with trans guys. It's taken me a while to figure out
what's ideal,
what works for me, and what keeps.
What
me
have
healthy.
you noticed? I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Have you noticed any changes in how you
emotions
think and feel due to the changes in your hormones for both of you? I remember now. I have a family member who had a testosterone sensitive type of cancer and had to go on these hormone blocking drugs. And he's not trans. He's just cis or whatever. But he was commenting about how different he was feeling and emotional and empathetic and, all the stereotypical female type traits. I thought that was so fascinating. Did you both notice changes in how you thought and felt about certain things as you started changing?
It was so long ago.
Yeah, I was going to say, Chloe was a
15,
kid.
So
hopefully you're different than you were then.
I grew out of those high emotional times. But I don't produce anything naturally at this point. So my estrogen and testosterone are both supplemented.
Do they give you progesterone too, or is it just estrogen?
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
See, and I have the opposite problem. My body is still actively making estrogen, and I take testosterone. But if I quit taking testosterone shots, my body would start right back up. Mm-hmm. And in fact, my body would also convert excess testosterone back into estrogen. So,
are you on aromatase inhibitors and all that stuff, or
no? I just keep my keep an eye on my levels. But I've noticed, for example, if I have to mess up my shot schedule because I'm traveling or something, and so I double up a little bit and I get a little extra, a little extra or something, I notice that it immediately makes me feel different.
Like how?
Goodness, if I'm too low or too high, both the same things happen. I get tired, I get cranky, I get irritable, I get hungry, I start craving chocolate.
That's just me every night.
It's probably the hormones, I swear, because if I have too much testosterone, I'll start getting cramps like I'm PMSing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if too much of it is getting converted to estrogen. Maybe that might be why.
It goes back the other way. So especially for people who are thinking about trans people from a competitive standpoint, especially trans men, if they happen to still have their original plumbing in terms of their internal reproductive organs, there's no such thing as being able to gain too high of a testosterone advantage over cis men, because your body automatically converts the extra back into estrogen. There's like no way to max out, roid out. Your body fixes that.
Now,
so you can't overdo it.
You're actually taking less testosterone than some female bodybuilding competitors will take. I know female bodybuilders will take higher doses than that just to compete in their chosen sport. So would you get tested then for other substances? For example, you're saying if you take too much testosterone, it gets converted to estrogen. Let's say you were to take a anti-aromatase drug like Arimidex, which prevents that, or an estrogen blocking type drug or whatever that athletes will sometimes take. Are those banned for you as well as other people? Like what's considered legal in the IOC for you? Is it just the hormones that you take because of your the testosterone and the estrogen, or?
So my understanding is that if you are taking whatever it is that you're taking as part of your hormone replacement regimen, because that's different for everybody depending on what the person's individual medical needs are, that whatever that medical program is, that's considered part of your treatment, and that's allowed. The problem is if you deviate from that. So that's why the new IOC rules require all this rigorous testing, is that it's individualized. So it's like for this person, their levels are at this level and they're taking this thing and whatever. So then you test them again and see if they're deviating from their whatever their levels are. Because I guess the thing that the IOC is realizing, as medical professionals everywhere are realizing, as more and more trans people come out, live authentically, go through medical care, is that the ideas about what happens when you go through treatment, they're all changing. And we're realizing that everybody is individual, everybody's different, every trans person's transition looks different. What people do or don't do, how much they take or don't take, it's all different, athlete to athlete.
Now, I do want to be very clear on this point, and all of us, I can speak for all of us because we've all talked about this many times. I think individuals should be able to do whatever they want to themselves. We're totally in favor of all that. And private organizations have the right to decide how they want to, sanction their sport or who they're going to allow in. The conversation really was about, is there an advantage? I believe firmly, and I don't think there's a huge advantage from a male who transitions to a female and competes. Although there may be the other way around, a female who transitions to male and competes. But I do think male to female transition may have some huge advantages, and this just comes from my own background in sports and training, and both of you are saying no, there is no inherent advantage in that. Is that correct?
This is such a big conversation.
Yeah,
I think because you can put that for anything, though. You can put that to genetics. You can put that to your nationality. You know what I mean? Like my friend Kiana, is 5'11", way bigger than me, just naturally stronger than me. I can't lift what she lifts. I can't move as fast as she moves. Where's the advantage at that point? We're just two different people. You know what I mean? Like, he's bigger than you.
Right.
Like,
Thank you for pointing that out too.
Yeah.
Well, and especially in a sport like CrossFit. So I get the no, I don't get the argument, but I understand how people who don't know better could make that kind of an argument for a sport where everybody who competes at an elite level has more or less the same body composition, the same size, the same physical talents, the same physical attributes. Like people who do Olympic track racing, for example, they're all the same size, more or less. They're all the same body type. CrossFit is not like that at all. Everybody who does, like CrossFit athletes are just as varied within the men's and women's divisions as they are compared to each other. There are female CrossFit athletes who are taller and probably way more than some of the male athletes. There's no like homogenous example of what a CrossFit athlete looks like. And so especially in the CrossFit context, for people to say, oh, trans women have an inherent advantage is bullshit. Chloe's like, what, 5'5"?
5'4",
5'4" and what, 120 pounds soaking wet probably.
I wish.
130 maybe.
138 maybe.
Okay, she's 5'4" and 138 pounds soaking wet. She doesn't have a physical advantage over any cisgender female, except the fact that she's been training for the last
a very long time.
X amount of time and is clearly like a very strong and an accomplished athlete. But that's not because she was assigned the male gender at birth. It's because she's dedicated time to being who she is.
Right. I think when we look at it on an individual basis, it can all break down. For example, if I look at the top level of any sport in the women's category, like if I look at the top MMA fighters, and I take Ronda Rousey, and I'm like, okay, she's one of the top female fighters. She'll beat the crap out of 95% of the men in the world, when we look at it that way. But when we compare her to a man who also competes at the highest level, same body weight, obviously there's an advantage. And I think that's why we originally created, or sports had a male. Actually, most sports were always men only, and then they had a female division. And men and women typically don't compete against each other in most physical sports. And I think that's why, as far as athletes looking the same in the older sports like track and field and all the sports you see in the Olympics, that's the democratization of sports. Originally, they all look different. Originally, if you look at the Olympic competitions 80 years ago, you did have a lot of difference in size and stuff. But as competition got stiffer and stiffer, the ideal body type started to emerge for each sport. Like a swimmer typically has really short legs, long torso, long arms. A sprinter typically longer legs, and so on. CrossFit, I don't think, has been around long enough to see that, but you're starting to see it, because if I look at the competitors of CrossFit when it first started and I look at them now, they don't look, there's a big difference.
Didn't we
now
start to see a big discrepancy once you got up into like the 200-pound range? Like we kind of were looking at 150, 160, 170, and then there was like a big sort of
when you talk about like at Chloe's size, you're not there isn't a big difference.
But it's like sort of a hockey stick like graph to that after a certain point.
When I look at when I look at the top level and I compare apples to apples, for example, if I compare a female cisgender athlete, 148-pound powerlifter, and I look at her top squat, and then I look at a male cisgender male, same body weight, his top squat, the male is typically anywhere between 60 to 80 pounds or maybe 100 pounds stronger. As they get heavier, that discrepancy starts to get bigger. Like the heavier they get, the bigger the difference.
Well, sure, but that's a cisgender man. That's not a trans woman who's been on hormones for 2 years.
Right. And so where I start to get with that is the argument, and I've read a lot about this, and this is why I'm like super open to having my mind changed on this. But when I read about this, if a man goes through transition and goes on the hormones, he will lose strength. He does lose some bone mass because his testosterone levels are lower. He's taking estrogen, all these other things. But there are other things that, especially once you go through puberty, that stay more permanent, like lung capacity, heart size, especially left ventricle, muscle hyperplasia, which is, so as muscles grow, they hypertrophy. But then there's something called hyperplasia, where muscle fibers actually split and become new muscle fibers. And this happens, we think, through puberty. So where some of this muscle becomes more permanent. Like I'll give you an example. I had there was a friend of mine who used to come into my gym all the time to visit, and he was 85-year-old man, didn't work out anymore, but he had these just really muscular forearms, and the guy was an Olympic lifter for decades. He stopped working out, didn't do it anymore, but you could see the remnants of the hyperplasia that had happened through the decades of training. And
we see examples of this with bodybuilders, right? You see bodybuilders that were competitive bodybuilders for 10, 20 years of their life, and even if they don't touch weights for the next 40 years, they still have this dense muscle that they've built.
But the thing that you're talking about is still very individualized, because somebody like Chloe, who transitioned when she was a teenager, even I mean, you were a small teenager. You were not a big teenager. So you stopped your physical puberty when you were 15 as a small 15-year-old. There's no advantage there. My problem with the whole drawing lines about competitors, right, should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed, is that trans people are not all the same.
Right.
To make that assumption is that you could put all trans people, even medically, in the same category, and you can't, because not all of us start transition at the same time. Not all of us take the same hormones. Not all of us take the same kind of hormones for the same amount of time.
There's so much difference. Factors. Like, I didn't even start being athletic until my late 20s.
Way after you transition.
Right. But I mean, so that kind of throws the theory out the window, right? What if someone decides to become an athlete later in life? They haven't built the muscles that you're talking about.
What do you think the most ideal way to standardize,
do you guys have it? Because right now, what is it? Is it 1 or 2 years? Do they say that you?
I believe
now
it's
not surgery, but
it's not surgery, but it's 2 years on hormones. Yeah.
Do you guys think that that's a good standard, or do you think it should go back further?
I think truthfully, I think when people are worried that a 2-year period is not going to make a big enough difference is this mythical vision of a person who decides to transition from male to female after they're a buff, very capable, super solid athlete. And then they magically decide to transition, and then 2 years later become like a fierce competitor in the women's category. Just doesn't happen like that.
Well,
that's just not realistic.
Isn't that what we saw with the MMA fighter? Isn't that what we saw with the MMA fighter?
Yeah.
No, she. I mean, I'm not saying that never happens, but I'm saying to make policies that affect all possible transgender athletes everywhere based on a very specific example of a potential scenario where there could be some kind of an advantage is ludicrous. To me, when I hear cis men, it's always cis men that bring this up, by the way, and it's always cis men freaking out about trans women who want to compete. When I hear these thoughts, all I can think about in my head is that men have this idea that there is some inherent advantage to being male.
Physically.
That's your assumption. I don't think that that's actually true.
Think that,
we haven't proven
it. But I don't think it's because you were born male. I don't think it's because you're born male. I think that it's because there are things that are in your body, but it's not
I hear what
inherent.
you're saying. Okay, I hear what you're saying.
The idea that men are somehow just naturally physically superior is not true.
Well, I think this
across the board.
I disagree. I disagree with that.
Yeah, I think this. I think if you're male, if you're a biological male, the things that come along with it include the hormones, include the changes.
Yeah, but that's not immutable. Those things don't remain advantages just because you were born with them.
No, but if you go through puberty, some of that stuff stays.
Some of it does. But my point is that we haven't been treating, observing, or engaging with trans people who've been going through medical transition for long enough to make any real conclusions about what medical transition does or does not do to one's body.
That's a fair
statement.
Truthfully, I struggle to find trans men that are 10 years older than me who can talk to me about what's going to happen to me 10 years from now on hormone therapy. Like, it just hasn't been around enough. So we're asking for, well, what if this happens and what if that happens? Like, fuck, just let trans people compete and we'll find out what happens.
Well, I mean,
because that's the only way we're ever going to know, right? Is if we just let people do it.
Well, then why not let?
Why not? It's just like it's a matter of standardizing the. Like, how do we handle this?
Well, why not let them compete in their biological sex? If it's not about if you're not going to change your sex in order to win, and it's really not about that, then why not just let them compete at their biological sex?
Well, because that's invalidating a person's gender identity.
Why?
Well, because
if you were looking at me and telling me I have to compete as a woman, that's invalidating to my gender identity.
I'm not saying that you should. I'm just asking why. I'm curious to why you would think that. You know.
Well, because
or why not make another category?
another category so I could compete against only other trans people? I mean, my body is a human body. I'm not a trans body. I'm a human body.
Right.
So like, I shouldn't have to be in a category of other people that have bodies just like mine in order to do something.
I mean, when you think like that, I think then we should just open it all sports up to it's humans,
male or female
Well,
at
why
all.
not?
Right.
I mean, that's
Humans
but
compete,
a lot of gyms
Why
are
not?
doing
Why
that.
not?
Yeah, I
A lot of gyms
I
do
don't-
that.
So
we
that
don't-
would solve what we're thinking about right now is just why separate any
Everybody
of us.
compete. Well,
if
I
you're
think
if you're 150, you're 150. and
Yeah,
in
that's one of the things
and not
that we're
team
working
sports,
Well,
we're competing by body weight.
But then that conflicts
Right?
with something like Title IX, you know, and there are things that have made, you know, initiatives towards like getting, you know, people scholarships and things like that. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, this is, and that's where, you know, if you're a female athlete in high school and you can get a scholarship, you know, there's been, and by the way, it's not just cisgender men. I
could care less. I feel more for the women. That's how I feel.
Recently,
I
there's
could care
been
less.
they've been speaking out more. I've seen more women speak out and say it's not fair. Recently, there was I forgot what competition it was. I think it was in cycling, and you know, transgender wins the competition, and there were women who were saying, "Hey, this isn't fair. I've been working for this for so long. I lost this competition. I think that this person has an unfair advantage." I do also want to say this though: these are organizations that it's fully within their right to change, to make their standards how they want to allow people to compete. So I don't think there should be any laws or anything ridiculous like that. Yeah. And I do think the market will determine, like you said, what this is going to look like eventually, because a lot of these sports, you know, a lot of these sports need viewership,
They're
need people
evolving anyway,
participating, and we'll see, you know, we'll see what that kind of looks like. And I do like that you said, I'm a human. I at the end of the day, I'm a huge advocate of the individual. And I think when we look generally, because right now we're talking about generally men, generally women, and what that means, it all breaks down when you look at the individual. And at the individual level, that's what's important. And I'm 100% for that. But sports for a long time have done this. And by the way, this isn't a new dance that sports have tried to do. This is ever since anabolic steroids entered into the fray. This has been a conversation. How do we, you know, level the playing field?
How do we test for this?
Which you know, Chloe, you made the argument about genetics. Like, what if someone's just taller or stronger? You're absolutely right. That plays a major role. But it also doesn't answer the question of, okay, you know, these sports are trying to. Because what do you think would happen if we let everybody compete together in every sport? I can 100% predict what would happen. Men would dominate most of these physical sports. And it's not, we're just bigger and stronger, and it's just, you know, our hormones and our genetics. I think we would dominate most of these sports. And when you look at the records, if I compare women, cisgender women, untested strength sports. So these are sports like powerlifting where they don't test them for steroids. So many of them probably take them. And I compare them to men of the same weight class, drug tested, which doesn't guarantee that they're not on steroids, but it does show that they're probably on less or more careful because they're getting tested. The men still will outperform the women who may be on anabolics. And so I feel that there's, and you're right, on an individual level, God, it's different from person to person. Like when we use Chloe as an example, I mean, you transitioned so long ago, I don't think that there would be an inherent advantage. I just don't. But if you have someone who was, you know, 25, 26, transitions, now they compete at 28 or 29, there might be an advantage, you know, there might be an inherent advantage into that, you know?
I mean, I'm putting my hands up because, like, so what? And first, I mean, cis women who get mad because they feel like they might potentially have opportunities taken away under Title IX that they might lose to trans women. Like, trans women are not your enemy. Trans women are your sisters. Don't forget that Title IX exists because the government had to mandate people treat women like equal individuals to men. Sure. Title IX only exists because nobody was letting women play equally and on the same level and for the same rewards without a law.
Right.
So women who are upset because they're losing Title IX advantages, that's a bit of a misdirected anger because like Title IX only exists because we have to mandate equality.
Well, I think they're upset because in order to get that, you have to be a top performing athlete. And it's like if I was top performing and now I'm not.
But a trans woman is a woman. and a cis woman is a woman. So a trans woman who's a college athlete who wants to compete in her sport and get a scholarship and do great at whatever she does, she deserves that opportunity. Just because she's trans doesn't make her any less deserving of that opportunity. If she's good at what she does, she's good at what she does. Like, a trans woman is not a second-class citizen to a cis woman. And it's not like cis women get the scholarships first, and if there's any left over, we give them to trans women.
Do either of you have any examples of women who've transitioned to men who are now dominating in their sport or winning? Because I keep reading the opposite. I keep reading about men who transition to women.
Chris Mosier.
So I don't know who that is. Explain.
He's a Olympic triathlete who is a trans man who does really well in competition against cis men.
Okay, excellent. So I had no idea that there was, because the ones I keep reading are men who transition to women who then, there was there was a weightlifter from New Zealand, there was a cyclist, there was a few other examples, but I don't hear.
There's also Kyle Mack, the
keep
wrestler.
in mind, some people are forced to be out. I transitioned at 15, so from the time of 15 to 2013, I lived my normal life as a woman. I was not publicly out to people. People knew because I grew up here, or people knew because they were friends of friends, but I wasn't publicly out about anything. I had to out myself to fight for a right that I thought I should have. So we are only talking about select individuals that
we know about.
There are hundreds and thousands of trans people all around us.
I was going to ask you the numbers. Do you guys know the numbers?
There's estimated 1.4 million trans adults in the U.S.
So because also, I mean, my era, 25 years ago, gay men were still being strung behind cars.
Sure.
And drugged through fields, right?
They still are.
But my point is, I felt I was forced to not talk about it. That I was less than human, that I had, if I wanted to survive, I just had to fit in. So I wasn't trying to be better than anyone. I wasn't trying to be different. I was just doing my life. Found a sport I enjoyed. I did okay at it. It was just the sequence of events. Not everyone wants to be out and fighting a fight.
Had you not told them, would they have ever found out?
Probably fucking not.
Okay. And I'm not asking.
Do you kind of regret that now? Like,
no, not at all. Not at all. Because it started this wonderful movement. But
this conversation probably wouldn't happen. That's how we found it.
I was just...
Did you get a lot of hate?
Like I said, I was just dotting my I's and crossing my T's. I just wanted to make sure that if I was able to move forward with a team, that my team would be safe because I provided them with all the correct documentation or whatever the hell they might need.
As a side note, by the way, it's really Chloe's position that she was in, having to think about, like, do I say something and out myself, or do I not say something? Undeniably would have been more successful had she not said something in the short term, right? But outed herself in order to make sure that she crossed her T's and dotted her I's, because the one thing that always happens when trans people are not out, if people find out later, it's always about accusing you of hiding something, pretending.
It would have been like a witch hunt.
Yeah.
Well, that speaks to your character.
People accuse you of like trying to trick people, trying to lie to people, trying to hide people. But like trans people, whether they're out or not, nobody is lying, nobody's hiding, nobody's tricking people. Right? You can be out or not.
I was pretty predominant in this CrossFit community, the Bay Area CrossFit community at the time. Tons of competitions, the friends all around, the whole gambit. So I knew a lot of people. So when all of that broke, I didn't even know the story was breaking, quote unquote. I was working out and I went and picked up my phone and it was just a flood of text messages.
Really?
Yeah, I had no idea.
Did you get a lot of hate?
Yeah. Mainly men. Very little from women. It was more people in the community that were surprised I never said anything or let them know than hate that was locally.
When you were competing,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, when you were competing, how well did you do in the sport?
Mediocre.
Mediocre
to well. It just depended. You know what I mean?
You kind of became one of the. I mean, if I Google, trans athletes, you pop up. You pop up now. you're saying you didn't anticipate to become that spokesperson.
No.
Was that scary?
Yeah, how does that feel?
You embrace it now?
It was terrifying at first, but there was the added component of the lawsuit. So I felt like I could never say anything. I actually haven't, until the last couple months, I still felt like I couldn't say anything. I couldn't speak without being under scrutiny. So I just kind of kept all of my emotions to myself during that time. I didn't really know who to trust or, anything. Because it was a freaking law. You can't be prepared for what a lawsuit like that is going to do.
Oh, I had
no idea.
It went, international.
Yeah.
What made you decide? What made you decide to do the lawsuit? Were you at odds with it at first and thinking, okay, should I do this or not? Or were you like, no, I'm going to sue them because this is not right?
So there was a certain person at HQ that's no longer there that was speaking to me in a way that I felt like I was just being belittled. I felt like I was being treated like the worst piece of shit on the ground. And I felt like it had been done before. Whether it had been done before or not, I felt like this had been done, like the tactics had been done before. And it's not like I just decided to sue from one moment to the next. It was a process. It was months. It wasn't something that I just took very lightly at all.
Is that because you were trying multiple times and getting denied a certain way? And is it always this person who's denying you? It
went from one person to the next, and then it's kind of just sat with one person.
What are some of the things they're saying to you?
It's all on the internet.
Well, I want to hear from you. And you're the person I care about. You're the one I want to know.
First-hand experience.
Basically, it was a lot of did we miss certain things in biology?
It was.
Oh wow!
It was the.
So it wasn't just no. It's like also insulting you.
It was the most patronizing piece of shit letter that any attorney, that a licensed attorney would send that letter is crazy.
Bennett's got it though. No problem.
It's crazy. No, it was basically.
I got you here.
It was basically like, did we miss something in biology where it says if you were born with an X and a Y chromosome that you could ever be anything but a biological male? Go fuck yourself.
Oh, they went there.
That was basically the attitude was you are what you are. You are what we say you are, no matter what you say you are, the end.
So
science.
Had they handled it differently, let's say they said to you like, okay, well, here's the deal. We think there may be an advantage. We appreciate you doing the sport, whatever. Had they handled it differently, do you think you would have reacted differently?
Who friggin' knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, because I feel
it could have been 2 more years of back and forth.
Yeah. Because I feel you. I mean, if someone comes at me like that, I'm like, well, fuck you.
Right.
Not only saying no, but
pretty
you're also
abrasive.
Yeah, you're also being an asshole.
So, I just.
No, you didn't win though, did you?
No, I had to sign a piece of paper
to not do it anymore or whatever.
It literally took a mental toll on me that I never expected.
I can't imagine. Yeah. I literally can't imagine what that would be like.
It was this volcano of emotions for me, coming out publicly, dealing with all of that, and then at the same time feeling like I couldn't say a damn word. So then I was trying to advocate, but then I couldn't do anything to advocate, if that makes any sense at all.
Yes.
Now you said Greg Glassman actually apologized to you publicly. How did that go?
Well, so I didn't know that the co-workings of Outwad and CrossFit. I didn't know any of that conversation was going on. Mm-hmm. Will decided to keep it from me, which was probably best because he knew what had been going on for me the last few years, emotionally. So within an hour before Greg announcing at the games that transgendered athletes would be able to compete, Will let me know. So then I was watching the live feed of it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I probably cried a little bit because it was just...
Sure. Oh, I bet.
It was like this giant
I definitely
relief.
did.
It was like this giant relief and weight off of my shoulders. And I didn't even care what the regulations are. Just that there's damn guidelines now and regulations that allows people to have more of a opportunity to compete. I keep forgetting you're over here. You're like the quiet. You're like the quiet one.
The silent one.
Yeah.
He's the fan favorite, though. Believe it or not, this guy's always getting.
It's because I barely talk.
He's Yeah.
It's like, yeah, talk. Yeah. Yeah.
That's very fascinating to me. So you must have felt redeemed.
Yeah, it was pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
I had carried the torch as far as I could, and I was just hoping someone else would pick it up. Mm-hmm. I had no idea it was like one of my best friends. I ain't touched.
You know, I'm not gonna. You know, I mean, to be just frank, when I meet people like you both, you know, you're good people. I haven't known you very long, but I like you both. I like that we're having this conversation. I wish more people could just talk objectively and have conversation and hear each other. And even if you don't change my mind on the competitive advantage thing, that's okay because we're talking about. What I don't like is the yelling and the fighting and
it's constant.
The divisiveness.
I can't stand it. I just kind of like in my normal life try to preach acceptance of other people no matter what. Mm-hmm. No matter what their beliefs are. Like my father is very conservative and voted for Trump. Like I'm not going to hate my father because he has different beliefs than me. Like that's our rights as human beings to believe in what we want to believe in. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I think people should just be able to sit down and talk. I don't understand why everything has to be a yelling match and a fight. Like no one's ever going to be definitely right and definitely wrong. Yeah. It's just not the world we live in.
I would love to hear you kind of share a little bit about what that's got to be like having a father that's conservative. You made the transition at a young age like that. Like, I mean, how has that been and how have you navigated through that?
So I think for a lot of people, and this is what, in my opinion, people forget. People can have different political views and personal views. Mm-hmm. My dad was raised to do one thing, to vote one way. That's what he's always done. He's never veered from it. It doesn't matter what the issues are. He's never veered from it. But with his family, he is the most liberal person in the world. My dad said he knew that I was female from the time I was born. My mom and dad didn't talk about it until I was 5. My parents supported the whole transition. They got me into a new school. My dad paid for my surgeries. Like 100% supporting family.
So you've had support the whole way through from family. That's awesome.
Just politically different views.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's. What about you, Bennett?
So I actually don't have a relationship with my father anymore, largely because of my transition.
Really?
He and I never had a great relationship to begin with, but when I came out to him as trans, that was like the last. That was the last bit of me that he could no longer understand. That was like, you know, sometimes you have that kind of a relationship with a parent where you just never are on the same wavelength. There are some family members and some parents you're like that with, and other folks you're not. My dad and I have never been on the same page, but my telling him that I was trans was like the last. It was the last thing that he just can't wrap his mind around it. So he still calls me by my dead name, which is you know, a term we use for your name you were given when you were born.
I didn't know that.
And that's extremely that's something that's very. I can imagine how offensive
that's extremely offensive.
Yeah, I can imagine what that would.
I mean, he basically, when I came out to him as trans, because we didn't have much of a relationship at that point. It felt very low risk to me to come out to him because it was like, well,
whatever.
Yeah, what you do with this information is what you do with it, because I don't have a lot in. I mean, it still hurts obviously because he's my father, but given where we were, I basically told him I was trans, told him, you know, please call me Bennett. And at the end he said, you know, I think I'm still going to call you blank. And he referred to me by my dead name. And I said, well, let me tell you what, you can call me Bennett or you can not call me at all. Mm-hmm. And I haven't spoken to him since. Mm-hmm. And that's
tough.
Probably 2 years ago. He texted me on my birthday a really long text message that had a lot to do with Jesus. And then at the end, he still called me by my dead name. So I am pretty sure that he's never going to get it and we're never going to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. And that's fine with me. My mom and her whole side of the family are super supportive. Okay. I have a loving partner and, you know, I have a great relationship with his family. My dad is just like, he missed the boat, and due to a lot of his own issues that don't have anything to do with me.
Is your partner cisgender male?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
Getting right to it.
There you go. Yeah. He's a cis guy. So it looks like I look to most people like I'm in a gay relationship, which is really funny because, only he and I and people around us know that I'm trans. I don't get clocked on the street, but it's funny. I actually pre-transition, I pretty much exclusively dated women. And
this is fascinating.
Wow, this is really fascinating.
I used to date mostly women, and when I came out to my mom, bless her heart. Like first, I came out as a lesbian as a teenager, then I came out as a trans man as an adult, and then a year ago,
I tried with women. It just it was no.
A year ago, I sat
this challenge. Yeah.
I sat my mom down. I was like, "Mom, so here's one more piece of good news. I'm dating a man," and I told her I sort of had this whole speech planned out. So I was like, "I'm dating a man," and I explained to her how I arrived at that position, and I was like, "Okay, so what do you think?" And she said, "Honestly, I'm just glad you're not going to date crazy lesbians anymore." And I said, "Well, I guess that makes two of us." She's like, "Because you've dated a handful of really good crazy ones." I was like, "Yes, Mom, thank you." So she rolls with the punches. But yeah, he's a dude. That's interesting.
Did he always date men before or women? Or?
Yeah. He identifies as what does he say? He's pansexual. He's dated men and women. So to him, humans are humans, and that's part of why we get along really well because I view myself as a human more than a man or a woman. So it kind of works.
Now, what's the difference between pansexual and bisexual?
Explain that.
Yeah.
So. I don't use
There's
the term.
a lot of terms now.
I know we got to get through these.
So
please educate us today.
I was going
to say, we're going to have a glossary underneath this because you've lost me on a couple of things already.
I used to use the word queer. The way that he uses pansexual, which to him and to people who say pan, my understanding is that it means that you could be attracted to any gender. So men, women, it's also inclusive of trans people.
Oh, I see.
So like bisexual is very specifically like
cisgender
men and women.
Cisgender,
it can be read that way. And it also, it feels kind of old fashioned in that bisexual is predicated on there being a gender binary, first of all.
I see.
It's also gives off this idea that there's like an equal amount of like equal opportunity male femaleness and a lot of folks that's not really accurate.
It's more like
it's more like momentary sort of. And so queer or pan seems to be what people say.
Yeah, it's pretty clear now that how you identify sexually or who you're attracted to is
on a spectrum.
It's on a spectrum.
Yes.
I mean, come on, the straightest dudes in the world go to prison, and then they do a lot of gay stuff.
Okay, listen, they don't even have to go to prison.
That's true. It's true. It's all on a
prison
spectrum.
Prison doesn't need to be involved.
I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
Men like shit up their butt. Like, let's just cut to the chase right now.
Yeah, but that doesn't.
We've been calling Sal out on this for a long time.
Oh my God! But that doesn't mean that they're.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it doesn't mean exactly.
Well, so
why does any of it matter? At this point, why does any of it?
You know what it is? I think what it is since technology's gotten where it is and things spread and people change, movements change so fast now. You know, in 2008, all presidential candidates and pretty much everybody in Congress campaigned against the legalization of gay marriage, including Obama and Clinton.
Yep.
That's how unpopular it was just 10 years ago. Within a short period of time, if you're a politician today and you say you're against gay marriage, you're probably not going to get elected. Or if you might in local, elections, but it ain't going to happen on a national stage.
Even national ticket Republicans don't tend to campaign on gay stuff anymore.
It just happens so fast. And my point with that, it's happened so fast. And
I can't stand it.
We call it sports for nerds over there.
I like it.
Yeah, sports for nerds.
Well, no, in the past, like the women's movement, civil rights took decades. Now it's like 5-year periods. And I think a lot of the pushback is because people are like, whoa, it's happening so fast. Like 1 minute, transgender individuals were kind of hidden. And now the next minute they're competing with, and we're changing bathrooms. And I think that's where there's a lot of
you blew me away with it. 1.5 million, you're saying?
1.4 million is the
That's a big
estimate.
fucking chunk of people.
It's a big number. That's just adults, too. That's just estimated adults in America. So I think the thing that is important to keep in mind is anytime you get caught up in the this is so much so fast and the newness of it, just remember, trans people have existed as long as humans have existed. As long as humans have been putting themselves into two categories, there have been people who have said, I don't fit into either one of those categories. In every human recorded society, there have been gender outliers. We've been around for forever. The only difference is that nowadays, we don't have to be quiet about it. We can say, this is who we are. We're just like normal people, and we can live our lives. But trans people have always been here, and for a long time, just had to quietly live their lives as a person they weren't. Just because they never transitioned doesn't mean they weren't trans. It just means they never got that opportunity to live their real life.
Right.
We've been here for forever. And so anytime it feels like it's all new and exciting, just remember, this has always been here. You're just now seeing it for the first time.
It's getting
Isn't
acknowledged.
India like a good example of this?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many cultures in the Eastern Hemisphere where they embrace a non-binary idea of gender just from the get-go. There are a lot of Asian cultures, particularly like in Thailand. They have a huge culture around embracing the idea that the gender spectrum is expansive. There are people there that present in a very non-binary kind of way on the daily, and it's just okay. That's just how they live. It's not new at all, and it's certainly nothing to be scared about. Like, if anything, we are more scared about what happens when people find out we are here than anybody should ever be scared of us being anywhere.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's a sad thing to be afraid to be what. Look, if you're not hurting anybody, I think it's sad to be afraid to do whatever. As long as you're not hurting anybody, that's always been my belief. If I don't care what you do or who you are, if you don't hurt anybody, I think it's crazy to be afraid. For being whoever you want to be. I think that's always been insane. But today it's definitely much more out there.
Except we're going backwards.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going backwards?
It feels like it.
Yeah.
Really?
100%.
Explain that.
What
Explain
feels
that.
backward? What feels like it's going
I
backwards?
know I just said I don't get into politics, but
Here we go.
this typical climate that we have going on right now is very, very cloudy.
Yeah. You know what I think it is? I think it's the most extreme people are the ones that we hear.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more people that are.
They're getting the most
I like
attention.
to think of it as the last dying gasp of like white male supremacy, sort of giving its last like this is the last little bit that we get to hang on to all the things that we've always gotten to hang on to, and all this noise and this anger and all of this crap that's going on right now is people feeling scared about the impending end of whatever control they feel like they've always had.
So I'm going to give you because I'm very much on the side of people need to be respected. People deserve dignity, and people should be judged on their actions and character. That's 100% the kind of person I am. But I do want to give you a little bit of advice. When you say white male, when you say that kind of stuff, what it does is it moves the conversation
It will shut us out of the conversation.
Well, it moves the conversation from the individual, which it should be the individual. Look, my political views are very libertarian, which are I believe in the individual. So respect the one individual. That's the smallest of all minorities. All minorities break down to one person, and I think that's where the conversation needs to go. But when we start to talk about groups of people, I think it moves the conversation where you don't want it. Like, you don't want the conversation to be,
Generalized.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Oh, when I'm talking about the white male freakout, I mean the people who run the government.
Okay.
I mean literally the white guys that,
but even that's
that are in charge.
Again, that's an overgeneralization.
Yeah, say
though.
the people who run it, the people in power, because.
But don't you think that a lot of their pushback to what's happening is rooted in their whiteness and their maleness?
No.
I think it's.
Can you
I think
make
it's-
that call when you're a white man?
that
it's not rooted in white
I think
maleness.
it's just the power thing.
I do
but
too.
power in this country is rooted in white men.
It's rooted in it's rooted in green and money.
That's right.
I'll tell you something right now. Some of the people the people who want racism and discrimination and bigotry to exist are the ones that profit from it. And sometimes that's black men, sometimes that's women, sometimes that's cisgender, it could be transgender, it could be anybody. When they profit from placing people in categories and generalizing, That's who we need to be careful for. And what we got to do, look, I'll tell you what, here was back when gay marriage was a big argument and debate, I actually marched. I marched in support of it. I have a lot of friends who are gay, and I thought it would be great to support them. But my argument was always this: why the hell does the government give anybody permission to get married? I think that's insane. Why do we have a certificate that says, hey, we want to get married? Oh, it's not legit unless we go ask permission.
We acknowledge this. Yeah.
I always thought that was insane. I didn't think the argument should be, legalizing anything. I thought it was crazy that we had to sanction it with the government. That's always been my argument. And so I always caution people, if you're going to make your argument and you're trying to make the argument of respect me as an individual, use the language that is on par with that. Because when you go on because I'll tell you something right now, when you say white men, and I know what you mean by it, by the way, I totally understand what you mean. But
I am a white man.
You are.
I'm a white man. So I feel like as a white man, I can speak honestly about the times when my whiteness and my maleness benefit me. Yeah. And I can put a finger on instances when both of those things have helped me.
Sure.
But
you've also had some massive disadvantages.
Oh, sure. And it's all relative. But
yes,
I feel like it's important to always keep your perspective intersectional. So, for an example, you can do an exercise that I call that's called a privilege walk. Although it doesn't have to be a walk, it can be mental. But you could do a privilege walk, no matter who you are, and find yourself more privileged relative to somebody else around you. So, for an example,
sure.
Everybody, well, we can't do this on a podcast, but put one finger in the air if you've ever walked into a gym and felt nervous because you didn't know which locker room to use.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. Put your hand in the air if you've ever walked into a facility and you've never known which bathroom was safe for you to go in.
Right.
If you can't answer yes to those questions, then you are more privileged than somebody to the side of you.
So here's where
here's why I have a terrible argument. Yeah. I mean, because as a quote unquote white privileged supposed to be guy, I could do things like raise your hand if your father committed suicide. Raise your hand
But that has nothing to do with I'm talking about as a trans person. So as a trans person, when I walk into a facility, I frequently don't know which bathroom I'm supposed to use. Yeah. That is something that you as a cis person have a privilege to not have to think about. That's my point.
Do you still feel that?
Yeah, but I could argue that. I know what you're saying with the bathrooms, but I could say someone that has more privilege because they didn't have to go through what I went through as a kid.
This is what I'm saying. It's relative to everybody, though. Right. That's why you have to keep it.
I think I hear. I hear what you're saying, but again, I think it always goes down to the individual. Because if I were to make a list of all the different potential things that could give me an advantage or a disadvantage, my goodness, that list would be so long. And now that's not to say that I'm not empathetic to the things that you have to go through. I'm extremely empathetic. I've never experienced that. I've never gone into a facility. I can only imagine what it must feel like, although I don't think it probably happens to you anymore because you could walk into the men's bathroom, nobody would even question now, but I can only imagine what that must feel like to walk into a restaurant and stand in front of the bathroom and be like, okay, which one do I go in? Because if I go in this one, maybe someone's going to say something. If I go in this one, someone's going to say something. I have a tremendous amount of empathy for what that must feel like. Absolutely. But again, we have to look at the individual because when it goes down and we just look at the individual, here's what's going to happen. When we make that argument and we make it strong and we stick to it, especially when you're on your side, on the side that you're on, people are going to be forced to meet you and engage with you and then pass their judgment from there. And you're both cool as fuck. And I think that's what'll win. I think when we start to categorize, because then you're playing their game. You start doing that, and I promise you, it's going to stay there. And we don't want it to stay there. No. We got to respect people as individuals. And like I said, I think it's funny because people who may have an opinion of transgender people and then they meet you not knowing that you're transgender, they're probably like, oh, dude, cool guy, really cool dude, and not even knowing, even though they may have an opinion that might be counter to that. And I think that's how we'll change people's minds.
I have many people on social media, probably a handful a month, men specifically, that follow me. And then I don't really talk about being transgender on social media. I feel like it's just a common knowledge thing. I don't know. I don't know why. Every once in a while, I'll just say something about it, and I'll get people that say that exact thing, that I had this belief, and I've been following you and watching you, and I had no idea. And thank you for opened
shattering my
eyes to
paradigm,
that.
right?
That also raises another good point, though, is that people's ideas about like trans people are based on this assumption that like you know who is and who is not trans.
Exactly.
Like you, just because you don't think you've ever met a trans person before, like I guarantee you've met a trans person before. They may not have introduced themselves as a trans person, but like just because you couldn't pick somebody out, clock them for being trans, doesn't mean that you haven't
No
met a
different
trans
than assuming somebody's white privilege because they have white skin, bro.
Well, no, because institutions treat white people differently.
It doesn't matter. We're talking about the individual.
No. But I'm talking about like I can look at a person and assign the privilege of whiteness to them, even if they're not actually white, because I give them that privilege in my head. Right? It's the same thing with male privilege. People give me male privilege in their head because they think I'm a dude. I don't think of myself that way, but they give me that because that's how they perceive me. That's different than saying you've never met a trans person because you can't tell what a trans person looks like.
I know what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree. I think you're right in many instances. However, many times that breaks down. I'll give you an example. People talk a lot about male privilege. Well, sometimes there is male privilege, and sometimes there's the opposite of that. For example, suicide. Men, disproportionate amount of men commit suicide. When we look at, I went through a divorce a few years ago, and now dual custody, and we both co-parent very well, but very, very difficult time. But when you look at the statistics of divorce, when the man actually wants dual custody, and the mom or the wife says, or the ex-wife says, no, I want full custody, men lose. Men lose all the time. I love children, love kids. I grew up around kids my whole life. I'm the oldest of 4. I am consciously aware of any time I meet someone new, when they bring a child, I can't just pick them up and kiss them because they're going to look at me and think,
you're a creep.
Oh, he's a guy, he's a creep. Now, I'm not complaining by any means. I'm not making a competition about who's more privileged or whatever. My point is that argument is only going to hurt what you're both trying to do. I think the argument needs to be, as an individual, if you want to judge me on my character and who I am, and that's going to fucking win. I promise you, that's going to win every time. Again, if both of you meet people and people actually meet you without preconceived, notions about whatever, they'll probably like you, and that'll win the competition. I remember, again, back to the gay marriage thing. I only use that one because that's such an example of how quickly the country shifted their opinion. It was TV shows like Will and Grace that got people because a lot of people didn't know gay people. And then they watched Will and Grace and were like, oh, okay, that's kind of all right. That might be all right or whatever. And people kind of open up, and then they started meeting people, and then they realized that they were cool. And before you know it, a majority of the country was like, hey, this shouldn't be illegal. You see what I'm saying? And so that's just where I think my stance is on it, on that whole thing.
This is such a bigger conversation.
Yes.
I mean, I've been hated on by other trans women.
Really?
Because of how I look.
How?
Because they've stated that I would never understand the plight of trans women that aren't passable.
Because you pass.
Because I'm pretty.
Oh.
Because looks
No
alone.
shit, huh?
Looks alone.
Is there a lot
yeah.
of that infighting with that?
I don't think it's so much
experience
infighting.
A lot of it, but it does come at me.
I don't think it's infighting so much as it is that like trans women, particularly trans women of color, tend to be like just the most universally shit upon group of people in America today. Like today, trans women of color have the highest rates of homelessness, joblessness, and murder in the U.S. A lot of it is because trans women, because they were born assigned male at birth, right, and sometimes don't have access to medical intervention, and they're not all as blessed to be 5'4" like Chloe. Like it is a lot harder for trans women to pass, and non-passing trans women get so much violence heaped upon them in our country, like verbal violence and actual physical violence, and also institutional violence as well, but certainly physical violence, like on the real. And for women who are in that position, you know, somebody like Chloe obviously can't help it that she is who she is and that her transition went the way it did. Same as me. Like I can't help it that I grew a beard and I'm not super short, right? I can't help that. But for people who don't pass, like it's really hard, and it sucks that they take it out, you know, that they choose to project that frustration onto Chloe. But like that is a real thing. Passing politics are are huge.
What are the some of the debates within the LGBT community? Are there debates and discussions and disagreements?
Oh God, that's another rabbit hole. You're just asking for all the rabbit holes.
I'm very curious.
No, we want you guys' help to dispel a lot of this shit.
A huge debate is the T even part of the LGBTQ?
Really?
That is a big debate because it's not a sexual preference. It's a gender identity. They're like not the same.
So they think about dropping the T?
No. It's just that
happen.
It's just that like trans
people of conversation.
Trans people are the lowest position on the LGBTQ totem pole, except for maybe intersex folks who sometimes get grouped into the LGBTQ community as well, just because like trans people, we don't know how to treat intersex folks, and so we stick them with the trans folks and the queers too. But trans people
are these people that will
intersex are people who are born with ambiguous genetic. Ambiguous genitalia.
It can go either way. You can have predominant male, predominant female, remnants of both.
And traditionally, people who were born intersex, they would just go like, "Oh, well, are you more like a male or more like a female?" And then they would chop them at birth and force them to live as one or the other.
How does that
nowadays people tend to just let intersex people live as an intersex human,
and then they decide later.
Yeah, or they just live as an intersex person.
But I mean, even within the community. I've experienced lesbians that have gone after trans men because they feel like that they're becoming traitors, and because male privilege. So lesbians feel like they've been pushed down by men, and when you're a trans male, that you're like trading.
You went to the other
side. I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole, but
it's also
all within the community.
Also, some of it has to do with age, because you think about like, are there people in the gay community and the lesbian community who 50 years ago would have been trans had they been able to be? Yes.
Sure.
And so like there's an age sort of thing in the I will speak in the like lesbian and queer female community, where there are women who identify as lesbians but who are super butch, who possibly under other circumstances may have allowed themselves to realize that they were trans. But given that transitioning wasn't really a thing, they just always lived as super butch women. And so now it seems like there might be an influx of like queer women transitioning and becoming trans men, and I don't think it's that more people are doing it. I just think it's that it's like more people are being themselves. Okay. It's easier to realize who you were.
There might be just a lot of pent up resentment that just has to do with their own challenges.
Oh, there's a lot of that. Like just generally, there's a lot of like misogyny among trans men in the trans men community. I like call my trans siblings out on misogynistic behavior all the time.
Do you think it's because now they're like, okay, I'm transition, I'm a man, I'm going to act like the most stereotypical macho, example of what a man is or whatever?
Yes.
I mean, and that's probably, to play devil's advocate, somewhat of a defense mechanism to fit in. Yes. Right? I mean,
in our culture, we have such a narrow view of like what it means to be a man and what an acceptable man looks like, and that's there's not a lot of gray area in society in terms of like how you play.
The same thing goes for women. You can't discount women, because for me, transitioning at such a young age, like I over-sexualized myself because I thought that's what men wanted, because that's what's put out there.
Yeah.
So everything I did was based around being sexual and sexualizing myself.
What you thought you were supposed to.
Ultimately put me in the sex trade, because I just went down that rabbit hole. Like, what is the ultimate form of acceptance from a man?
I do agree that how we interpret what it means to be male or female or masculine or feminine, I think a lot of it is convoluted with advertising and in media. Like being a man means that you punch people and you act super macho, and being a woman means you're dainty and quiet and all that kind of stuff. I don't like that. I don't like that. But I do think that there are traits that are very healthy, in men and women. We should celebrate them, like I revolve it around just
like
being
what?
Confident, being a good supporter, being a good. Now that doesn't mean. Now, by the way, this isn't your gender. This could mean
This is just qualities.
Yeah, these
you
are
mean
just
being a human being.
being a human being. But some of these things we've connected to being more male or more female, and good or bad, if that comes from biology or not. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is people should just be cool.
Well, isn't the gift of human knowledge is that we've learned what it takes to make humans healthy and well-rounded beings, right? We've learned enough about what makes humans happy and well-rounded to know that just sticking to a list of stereotypically masculine or stereotypically feminine behaviors without a mix of both is not going to make anybody happy or healthy. What makes a healthy, happy human being is a mix of all kinds of qualities, regardless of what gender stereotype is assigned to them.
And again, if you look generally, you can say generally women tend to be, more interested in this kind of stuff, and generally men tend to be, and you can definitely say that. There's been studies on this done for decades, but that's not the point, because again, if you go down to the individual, I can find many women that seem to enjoy the stereotypical male things and vice versa. And that's why
you can learn to do things that don't come naturally to you.
Sure.
Like you can recognize that being an empathetic person makes you happy and healthy. Empathy may not come naturally. It's a muscle and you have to exercise it. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't come naturally to you, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You just practice it
There's
more.
actually this test that you can take, I took a long time ago, where they have pictures of just people's eyes.
Was it in Cosmo?
I don't remember. No, it was a
to see their sexual preference.
No, to see what you're
attracted to.
No, not what you're attracted to.
Yeah,
empathy levels. So you look. I know. Yeah, just keep
like
throwing
you
words.
could tell if someone was sad.
Yeah, like can you tell what their emotion
yeah.
is? Are they sad, happy, or whatever? And women tend to score much higher than men. On that particular thing, on the empathy generally, again, but I score very high on that. So, and again, it breaks down when you go down to the individual.
Well, and then you have to also wonder, as somebody who spent, most of my life, more of my life being raised and socialized female than otherwise, there's a lot to the idea that you are socialized to look for those things too. That like women,
you can't separate the two.
Yeah,
That's true.
women may not naturally be better at reading emotions. We are taught to read emotions. I will only speak for my own girlhood, but I know that when I was little, I very clearly remember being told by women who were older than me, like, pay attention when somebody does this, it means that they don't feel this, or when they do this, it means that they're feeling whatever. Yeah. Like you were instructed how to interpret those things also.
Yeah, you're getting definitely more coaching in that direction, more training.
For sure.
I think there's probably, like all things, there's a mix of both, and it's hard to separate the two, like, that there's some genetic component and then there's some social component.
You asked Chloe the question earlier about whether or not she had noticed a change in herself from transitioning. So I actually did notice.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I know studies will show that when you give someone more testosterone or more estrogen over time, they show changes in the actual structure of the brain as well and certain behaviors. I would love to hear about what your experience was.
The first thing that I noticed changing about the way that I thought when I started taking testosterone was I noticed that my ability to change my perspective about an idea became much more limited. And I'll give an example. So I'm an attorney by trade. I am somebody that's been taught how to see and argue multiple sides of a point of view.
You're good at it too.
That's something that I know how to do. So I can still recognize gray area and nuance and argument, and I can still make those arguments. But personally, pre-transition, if somebody had told me something and then I thought about it for a while and I could change my mind about it. So if I disagreed with something, I thought about it for a while, I could reason my way around changing my mind. It's much harder for me to do now. And it's not that I can't still see the argument or the gray area.
You just notice a change in the way.
It's just hard. Yeah, it's really harder for my brain to switch.
That's interesting.
The way that I'm thinking. Another concrete example is the physiological cry response. So it used to be pre-transition, if I was super angry about something, it would manifest itself in crying, which I know a lot of women, I used to empathize with other people who were socialized female who suffer from the same problem, in that it's really genuine, serious anger.
Sure.
And it's not sad or upset, but your body deals with that emotion and that rush of feelings by crying.
Right.
that doesn't happen to me anymore. And even still, some really sad things have happened to me, and I cannot make myself cry, which is really sad. I actually get sad about the fact that I can't get sad.
Now, has that
anymore.
made you more or less empathetic for men?
You know, it actually made me a lot more empathetic for men. When I started transitioning and I noticed the ways that my brain was shifting and my ability to emote and just other things sort of changing, it made me empathetic because I realized that when you have, I feel like you have sort of like your tools are not as sharp in your toolkit. And I don't mean that like any offense at all. I just mean that like my brain on testosterone feels like a much more blunt instrument.
Yeah, I would have said I have different tools now instead of.
Well, it's more of a like a hammer than like a fine instrument, right? And so the ability to like fine tune my thoughts has changed, and I had a lot of empathy, thinking like, man, cis men who are, you know, raised in our culture, and if they're not raised with any particularly good influences about how to sort of be critical in your thought about when people tell you a good man does X, Y, or Z, or this is what men do, if you're not critical in your thought about that and you buy into that and you never really question that, and then you have this set of tools, it made me empathetic for the fact that like you really can develop some very unhealthy, socially counterproductive habits just by existing. It's sort of like it would be very easy to just naturally become kind of not an awesome person.
Yeah,
it takes active work to
there's some utility.
it takes like active work to unlearn the bad habits and sort of the free passes that you sort of
there's
get.
some utility in there's definitely some utility in the differences between the way this is a subject that I find fascinating. I read a lot about it, and there's definitely some utility in the differences between the way men tend to think and the way women tend to think. And I think they should both be celebrated. But like, you know, women build communities. They communicate far more and far more effectively. Men are very, very good at being focused singularly on one thing, sometimes to our fault. But many times societies also require that. Like you need the crazy, super hyper-focused guy who's going to invent shit or go over that mountain and it's super dangerous or whatever. So there's utility. That's why they both exist. I also think that there's a healthy version of both and an unhealthy version of both. And I find it very fascinating that you're able to see how, because it does, hormones do influence how we think and the way we feel about certain things. Did you notice any change? Because I know they say, the literature will say that typically, and I'm not in this category by the way, that typically men have better spatial skills or directional skills. And the reason why I say I'm not in that category is I literally get lost everywhere.
My boyfriend gets
Every
lost
time.
everywhere.
Okay. Did you notice any changes in your spatial ability, or is that too?
That's always been a strong suit of mine.
Okay,
So
no matter what.
I didn't notice any difference in like talents or like I didn't notice
special
that
skills
I
all of a
didn't notice
sudden.
that the change like
Starts the whittling wood.
amplified.
I could juggle now. Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Well, no, no. I was gonna say I don't notice that it amplified anything that I was like naturally. I don't know. I don't think it made me any more gifted at anything.
So it sounds like being a
just
guy fucking
shifts.
sucks. You didn't get any upgrades.
Well,
Other than the beard.
Other than the beard. Well, the muscle mass does help too, although that comes with its downsides too. Like I'm hot all the time now. That was actually the very first thing that I noticed about hormone transition.
We always fight over the
was how
thermostat.
hot I
It's
was.
Let's talk about
fucking
this.
hot in here, by
It,
the way.
it is hot in
I told
here.
you, Doug.
I need a fan.
It is hot in
Do you
here
have a
now,
fan?
but I felt like I was possessed or something, just sitting in an empty room and would just be sweating
Like, what's going
bullets
on?
for no reason at all. It felt very much like in the Spider-Man comics or in all the Spider-Man movies, the first day that Spider-Man wakes up after he's been bitten by the spider, and like everything he does, he's like, oh shit, look, I can do that now. I can do that. That's what being a trans person is like. At least it was like that for me.
start
Not
to feel
every day, but
You start to feel the influence of the
you're like,
hormones and all that
whoa,
stuff.
look at what I can do now. I
Wow.
can do this. I can do
That's
that.
weird. Chloe,
I can
you were-
sweat bullets.
You were
without
saying your
moving.
boyfriend is the one that doesn't have good. Do you have better direction?
God damn it. He can go to the same place like 5 times and still not know how to get
Oh
there.
my gosh, that's me.
And I'm just like, oh, okay. And I just figure it out. Go wherever I want.
How long have you been dating your current boyfriend?
This guy, it's just very new.
Is it now? Are you exclusive?
guy.
You exclusively date men?
Yes.
For the most part,
I've
yeah.
tried with women. It's just disgusting. For me, I don't like vaginas except my own. So I'm not going to like, I try. I gave it the good old college try about 3 times and it just was not my thing.
How does that conversation, when you start dating a man, when do you start having that conversation? I mean, that's got to be a tough. Is that early on or?
It's just a ball of wax. That one, it's like a lot of people in my life assumed like after I had surgery that I wouldn't have to say anything anymore. And I feel like it's actually more pertinent and harder to say something. I mean, I had surgery like a million eons ago, but still it's harder.
Because there's no natural...
Right, there's no signs
there's
naturally.
no impetus.
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
no, like, eventual
I could see that.
reveal. There's
For
no
me,
reveal.
it's just, I try to rip the Band-Aid off right away and just get it done. The problem is, it's not a problem because I am passable. I hate to use that, but
Sure.
this is just genetically how I look. But because I am passable, 99% of the men that come into my life have zero idea.
Right. Have you had some bad reactions when you tell?
I don't get physical reactions, but I've definitely seen like the red light up like behind someone's eyes because they're angry or confused or feel tricked, and I'm just like, calm down.
Yeah.
Like,
Calm down. Yeah.
I try to be empathetic and understand like a shock value and
Sure.
being curious. Axel's not a gun.
It always
Sit down.
it amazes me that anybody could ever meet Chloe and have them say like I'm a trans woman, and for them not to go, okay, you're still the fucking hottest thing.
No, I
Like,
get turned.
no, seriously,
I get
like,
turned down by I would say 99% of men.
I don't understand.
Even
that at
after they
all.
ask me out. Like we were in New York. This is before I was in the relationship. We were in New York, so I just turned that Tinder on like 5 mile radius, and probably 12 guys asked me out, and I told them all, and only one was okay with it. So it's just I don't know, part of the course. It's just how
It's
is.
hard to
There's
find-
a stigma around it,
I mean, that's just more. That is 100% to do with them and nothing to do
but
with
it's also
you.
an age thing. So
Yeah.
the 30 and under crowd seem to be 100%, more or
Way
less,
more
100% a-okay with it.
Do you tend to date younger then as a result? Or
Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of always have though. But
Well, she also doesn't look like she's as old
I
as
know.
she is. So
I know.
Cradle Robert.
she fits into that. She fits into that 30 crew.
I mean, it's always
because we're the
it's
same age,
always
but we don't look the
been-
same age.
Yeah, it's always been within 8 years
Wow, that's-
ish, and maybe
Ish.
12 sometimes.
18.
I mean,
Carried the
so
time.
there's a few. It's fun. A 25-year-old guy is fun. They have the stamina I prefer. Not always the technique, and not always like the mental capacity to be.
Oh my god! I'm like, if you're 25 or younger, don't talk to me.
I'm a very sex positive, body positive person.
Right.
Like, that is.
I'm
more,
surprised she has clothes on right now.
That's more my
actually.
thing than.
yeah, based off her Instagram, I am too.
Thank you.
I thought she was going to come in like
That's more my thing than. I'm an advocate for being trans, but I think being
body positive is more
body
important.
positive, sexually positive is the biggest thing to me. There's such a stigma around sex. It's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
But it's been very interesting as a trans woman to deal with people sexually and like see how that works.
Well, that conversation's like, boom, we need to have this conversation right now. Whereas when that's not, a topic, that may happen later on,
Right,
or
I
maybe
get
not at
treated
all.
like men. It's just weird. Guys act like it's herpes or something when I tell them that I'm trans. They like freak out and are disgusted, and I'm like, like I don't understand.
Do you guys, you ever get tired of having this conversation?
Yeah.
Telling people that I'm trans.
Yeah.
No, just what we're talking about right now. Like, I mean, let's be honest, and I'd love for you guys to be
Yes.
honest with it. Even coming here, were you apprehensive to come here thinking like,
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it in the beginning. No, I didn't say this to you. So you had asked me before
Yes.
if I was interested, and I ignored it because I avoid being like put up into a corner.
Sure.
And so I don't know you. I had
Right.
no experience with you. Chances are I could have come here. It could have been a 50-50. I could have been here by myself, and I could have been put in a corner, and it'd be me arguing with you guys. I try to avoid that kind of stuff. So I just don't answer.
Yeah.
I'll just
do you,
ignore you.
what about you, Bennett?
I
He's like, I love conflict.
Oh,
Yeah.
He said, sign me the fuck up. I'm coming. I don't even know who the fuck these guys are.
I mean, I'm an attorney, so I like arguing with people. If there's arguing on the menu, I'm down. But more to the point is that I view myself as an educator. I don't live in the closet. I have never been in the closet in any of my various identities that I could have hidden in the closet. Never have. I'm very out and proud about who I am, and I'm open to having this conversation with other people as many times as I have to, so that other people don't have to. Because I pass, because I have a beard, because I'm tall enough that most guys don't fuck with me, because I'm college educated, because I have all these things, I put myself in a position to have these conversations so that people who are not as fortunate as I am don't have to, because I hope that they won't have to. So no, I will have this conversation with as many people as ask me. Now, sometimes I will tell people like I'm not in the mood, or I don't have, I use this phrase called the spoons. Have you guys heard of the spoon theory?
No.
This is amazing. So it's premised on the idea, it started with a woman who suffered from chronic illness. She had an autoimmune disorder that caused her chronic pain. It might have been fibromyalgia or something similar. But the idea is that everybody has a certain number of spoons that they start the day with. And everything you do costs you a spoon or two or three. And for some people, depending on what situation you're in, certain tasks take more out of you than others. And so sometimes I just don't feel like I have the spoons to give to a conversation about my gender identity or trans issues. Some days I have the spoons and I'll say, yeah, I can have that conversation. But some days I just don't have the emotional energy or the physical wherewithal. But, part of being a person who takes care of themselves is recognizing when you do or don't have the capacity to engage something and knowing when to turn it off. And so I turn it off when I don't have the space to, so that when I do, I can have that conversation.
I call that fucks.
Yeah. It's like I don't have the fucks to
No
give.
more fucks.
I like get so many
sometimes it's about fucks, but sometimes it's just about energy too. Like sometimes you just don't have you're like, I literally cannot be fucked to like get up right now.
Sure.
I like to say when it's more of the fucks, I say I don't have any more spoons. All I've got is knives.
Let me give you one of these bad boys.
No more spoons in my drawer. It's only knives. So stay away. But yeah, so I like to have these conversations. I keep a blog. I am out at work. A big part of my practice is helping to educate people on issues of diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So yeah, this is my work.
What are some other of the misconceptions out there, the things that maybe annoy you the most that you have to combat?
Well, so you asked a question earlier that raised a point that I wanted to bring. You asked Chloe about what the steps were in her transition.
Yeah.
So one of the common misconceptions that I want to make clear for everyone is that trans people are a very big community, and it's a broad umbrella. And what it means to be trans is kind of different to everybody. And so every trans person, their transition looks different to them. And so like what Chloe has had done or what she has chosen to do to bring her body in line with herself is different than what other trans people may feel like they need to do in order to do it. So there's no like set agenda for a gender transition. I run into people all the time who have the misconception that if you don't have dysphoria about all of the parts of your body, then you're not trans. And that's just false. There are a lot of trans people who don't choose to have gender reassignment surgery because they don't have any problems with their body the way it looks. They may have problems with the gender that other people assign to their body parts just based on them being body parts, but they don't necessarily have a problem with their body themselves.
So for me, having surgery was crucial.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't imagine another day with male genitalia,
And other trans women just don't feel like that.
which baffles me.
Yeah.
Like
and
I don't understand that. I
Sure.
can still support them, but I don't understand that. That's not my experience.
What's the legally now? You don't need don't need reassignment surgery. What's the legal definition now of when the government considers you male or female? Is it just a hormone for a certain time?
It's different. It's different in every state, and it's different.
Really, there's
for
no
the
federal. Okay.
No, it's different everywhere. So in the state of California, in order to legally change your gender, say on your driver's license, you go to the DMV and you fill out a form that your physician has to sign an affidavit saying that you are undergoing appropriate treatment for gender identity disorder or for gender
But
identity.
that's not new.
No.
That existed when I transitioned.
So that's not
been
new.
around a very long time.
That's not new, but the difference is that California law used to require surgery as part of gender identity treatment, and it's not required anymore. Basically, the law says that your doctor says that you're doing what's appropriate for you, whatever that means. So for some people, that's surgery. For other people, it's not.
Now, what happens? Is there something that will indicate biological sex if there's an emergency? Because I know that there are cases where if you're biological male or female, that in the ER, that they need to know, uterus or whatever. Is there anything like that? Or
No.
Okay.
Nope.
It
It would be up to the person to disclose. I mean, like if I went to the emergency
What if you were
room-
unconscious? though?
Well, if I was unconscious, they'd just have to take my pants off.
Okay.
It'd be pretty obvious.
Well, don't they test for, if you're pregnant, even like down to, if you're a girl, like,
Well,
little girl, they'll test for that just so they know.
I mean, I OD'd and was admitted to the hospital unconscious. There was never an issue.
Okay.
I think it depends on also why it is that you're going to the doctor. So this raises an interesting point. There's a hashtag, I forget if it's like sick while trans or something like that, but it's basically people sharing their stories about terrible things that have happened to them when they've gone to the doctor to seek treatment for something completely unrelated to their gender and have been told that they can't receive medical treatment because they're trans. So for example, I had a friend who we were at UC Irvine, and he went to the UCI health clinic for a sinus infection. Just a sinus infection, happens to be a trans person. And they told him that they couldn't treat him for his sinus infection because they weren't sure how the antibiotics were going to interfere with his hormone therapy. And he's
ignorance.
like, excuse me, just the same way it would with anybody else. I have a sinus infection. But they wouldn't treat him because they didn't know how to treat a trans person. That's ridiculous. It's like your gender identity in that case has nothing to do with what you're there for.
There's a few cases where we'll count, but maybe
yeah.
not that.
I
No.
kind of want to back up a little bit as well when you're asking about what it looked like for me.
Mm-hmm.
So up until recently, doctors just believed that for trans women that you just counteract the testosterone, counterbalance it, and then remove the source completely. But that's just not the case anymore because you need testosterone for your body to function properly.
Right.
So for many, many years, I just had estrogen in my body. And so, but that was just the school of thought. That's just how it was. To make you as feminine as possible, you removed all the testosterone. So now I have a balance of both.
What did you notice a physical difference, emotional difference? Did you notice any differences between the two?
Well, the biggest perk was sexual.
Yeah,
I mean, because I'm
testosterone
already a
drives that.
huge sexually driven person anyway. So for me, that was phenomenal. And my mental state and my sleep.
Interesting.
You both went,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, those
at the
are
same time.
extremely important things.
Yeah.
We talk about the importance of both those things.
So
Well, hormone balance is we're in the fitness and health space, and that's a big, big deal. And I can only imagine how difficult it would be to balance that as you're.
Right.
It probably takes years to figure it out.
Exogenously, yeah,
The-
like being able to have the right blend.
the newer doctor that I'm seeing couldn't believe that it was working out the amount I was and doing what I was doing with no testosterone.
It's, I mean, the medical profession has basically treated trans people like science experiments for the last 50 years. There's been no real concerted study of how to treat and help trans people with hormones. It's all pretty much hearsay, what people say at conventions. It's all very sort of informal. It's only just starting to be tracked on a long scale basis, but even the only study to my knowledge that's been done on the long-term health effects of hormone replacement therapy in trans men has only been done over the last 15 years, and it was only with fewer than 200 people in the study. So it's not even really that big, that good of a study. But what Chloe is saying with the experimentation that's just how we get treated. The second endocrinologist I ever saw decided for whatever reason he thought my testosterone dose should be half of what I had been taking under my prior doctor, even though there was nothing wrong with my labs, nothing like that. He was about 93 years old, had never treated a trans person before, thought my dose was incorrect without seeing any information, cut it without my having any say in it. And basically I was like a crazy person for 3 months. I felt totally out of whack, like emotional, tired, moody, all these terrible things. Finally went back to him and was like, no, I need to go back to where I was. And he was like, I just think that's too high, and had no regard for what I was saying. So I had to see a different doctor. He also told me every time I saw him that I need to be careful not to get pregnant, because something really terrible could happen if I ever got pregnant while I was on T. And I was like, first of all, you only need to give me that warning once, bud. Like, just the one time is good enough. But certainly every time I sit down, you reminding me that I could get pregnant is a bit triggering. So I also thought it may be because he was too old and he didn't remember he had told me before. He actually died shortly after I quit seeing him. So he really was really old. But he was an endocrinologist. He is the kind of doctor that is supposed to treat people for things like I needed treatment for. And he had no idea what he was doing.
Wow.
And he was supposed to be an expert. So it's a lot of being trans is about having to advocate for yourself and having to do your own studies and track your own.
Are there specialized doctors out
and-
there that, you can recommend, or,
There's so many.
There are.
Yeah.
There are now.
Yeah, there's
There's
a lot more
so
now.
many. I mean, my first doctor was actually right over here, like off the Alameda.
Really?
And that's all she did. 25 years.
You know,
ago.
It's regional though, because like here in NorCal, there's a lot of resources for trans people in healthcare.
Well,
but
balancing out hormones for anybody is
Yeah, it's
hard
tricky.
because, like, they just came out with a study that showed that in men, testosterone levels don't dictate how strong they are or how much muscle they build as much as the androgen receptor density does.
Ooh, say it again.
So androgen receptors are the receptors that the testosterone attaches to, and they were finding that men with lower testosterone levels just got more out of that testosterone than some men with higher testosterone. And this is more of a recent thing. And I have clients who've had to go on thyroid. We've been giving people thyroid medicine forever, and it's like takes them like a year or 2 years to figure out the right dose. So it's a hard thing to figure out. Anyway.
What about cost? How much did this cost you?
Yeah.
Can I ask you that? I have no
In terms of
fucking
what's
clue.
covered and what.
Yeah,
you have
like
to
how much out of pocket?
Out of pocket, yeah.
luckily,
I
with
think it
at least with
depends.
medical insurance,
How big you go, or what?
Post Affordable Care Act.
How big you go? Is that? Sorry, that's just an inappropriate joke right there.
That's fine.
No, but the interesting thing is though, so since the Affordable Care Act was enacted, states had to enact policies saying that insurance providers within their states could no longer discriminate against trans care. So it used to be that even if you had health insurance, your health insurance provider could refuse to cover care just because it was related to gender identity reasons. That's no longer allowed. So if you have insurance, theoretically, you should be able to get insurance coverage for all of your care, which means like my copay for my testosterone is like $10 for a vial or something. It's cheap. But the problem is that for surgery, even though it might be technically covered by insurance, surgeons who provide gender affirming care for trans people tend to be plastic surgeons, and they tend to be people who don't take insurance.
Right.
So at least I know,
falls under the cosmetic thing still.
yeah. Well, and because if you're a plastic surgeon, particularly so I'm a trans guy and I've had top surgery, which means I had a double mastectomy in order to have a more male contoured chest. The people who do that procedure are plastic surgeons.
Sure.
Right? Plastic surgeons don't take insurance because the procedures that they do are not covered by insurance. And if you know anything about administrating medical insurance, it's a huge nightmare. And so if they offer a service that isn't traditionally covered, they have no impetus to get into any insurance markets because the people who buy their services pay out of pocket. And so I have insurance that theoretically would have covered my surgery, but I couldn't find a surgeon who took insurance to cover it. So I had to pay out of pocket. Yeah.
And it can be quite expensive.
Yes.
I can only imagine.
I paid out of pocket because I wanted to get it done fast. I could have gotten on a waiting list for somebody that would have taken my insurance and waited for like a year or more. So
I think
for
my
me, it was
hormones
that.
for a year cost about $1,200.
Per
Maybe $1,400.
You said per year?
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
That's a lot. That's like
But-
$100 a month.
Well, it's because of the testosterone. I do testosterone pellets, the bioidentical.
Those are more
So
expensive.
it's just expensive. I don't care to do
How often do you have to get the pellets put in?
Every 4 months.
Oh, so they last for
4
a
to
while.
5 months, yeah.
That's probably better than the up and down that you might get with
Yeah.
injection type of deal.
I've never tried the pellets myself. I've done topical like androgel, and I've done injections.
Surgery isn't cheap. I mean, and this is another thing I think we go along with that whole privilege thing. I was lucky enough to come from an upper middle class family that supported me and helped me. Not everyone has that available to them.
Right.
Not everyone can even afford their copay. You know what I mean? To have the surgery. So there's part of the privilege thing, I guess. But I mean, we're into the tens of thousands of dollars depending on what we're talking about.
Well, I want to really just commend you guys for just coming on and talking with us about this. I know you were a little apprehensive, like you said before. I appreciate this conversation. I think this needs to happen more. I don't think the whole, the conversation around whether or not it's an advantage in sports, I don't think we necessarily resolve that. But at the end of the day, I think we all agree that that's up to the organization, and I think we'll see how it plays out. But at the end of the day, I think we also all agree that
I think we're all pro.
We're all team human. Yeah,
I think we just need to give it about 10 or 15 more years, and then we'll have actual evidence and stuff to study.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we don't have enough time behind us right now.
It's going to be a little tumultuous probably for about 10 years.
Thing,
Well, especially with a sport like CrossFit, like it's such a diverse and multifaceted sport to try to shoehorn anything into two.
We'll see if that sport even exists in 10 years.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother discussion. But I want to thank you both for coming on the show.
It's been great.
Really appreciate it, and maybe we'll do this again.
I hope so.
We should have an update.
You guys can listen to our show. Excellent. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for listening to Mind Pump. If your goal is to build and shape your body, dramatically improve your health and energy, and maximize your overall performance, check out our discounted RGB Super Bundle at mindpumpmedia.com. The RGB Super Bundle includes MAPS Anabolic, MAPS Performance, and MAPS Aesthetic. 9 months of phased expert exercise programming designed by Sal, Adam, and Justin to systematically transform the way your body looks, feels, and performs. With detailed workout blueprints and over 200 videos, the RGB Super Bundle is like having Sal, Adam, and Justin as your own personal trainers, but at a fraction of the price. The RGB Super Bundle has a full 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can get it now plus other valuable free resources at mindpumpmedia.com. If you enjoy this show, please share the love by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes and by introducing Mind Pump to your friends and family. We thank you for your support, and until next time, this is Mind Pump.